Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
We are in the new studio. Now, look, lots of people last week said, love the new setup, guys.
Yeah.
Anything you've been teasing for a while. Little bit of something to say about that.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm glad we had the professional studio last week, so that this now, by definition, comparison, just doesn't look as good. So we spent absolutely ages in the very little spare time we have trying to get this all set up and ready to go. And hope you like it, guys. Doesn't look as good as last week, so whatever.
If we'd just not gone to this lovely professional studio last week, by the way, ran by James, lovely guy. Been talking to him a lot, haven't you, about our setup?
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
Really nice guy and amazing setup. If we hadn't done that though, and just come from your, I think, like box room, dingy cave, we call it.
Sorry, my studio.
Ogre pit or something. I don't know. Anyway, if we just come from that to here, this lovely penthouse suite in someone else's house, I don't know whose house it might be. A lot of people probably would have been like, wow, what a jump. But now it's just going to be like, oh, what happened to the old professional podcast one last week?
Maybe you should stick to that, guys. But I tell you what, no, we're here in Dylan's house, in Dylan's third room.
Yeah, all the cameras around here picking us up. Yeah. Right. I'm going to look at you down in the camera who's listening to this podcast on a camera, obviously. If you're watching, you can see me pointing right now. Anyway, lots of room here. Today, we're going to be talking about a crisis that I do think as a whole population we're walking into, sleepwalking rather. And we do always end up with crisis talks, don't we?
We love it.
We just go straight into the big issue. And it's that of the birth rate, the amount of children being born. And it's something we kind of need as teachers, isn't it? Children to teach.
Well, you could say that. I don't know. Is it up for debate?
I don't know. I think we probably do need them. And it's the impacts it's going to have on that birth rate declining.
Yeah.
If there are fewer children, that means that schools aren't full. And if schools aren't full, that means their funding is cut because we're on a per pupil model right now. So schools are going to be squeezed even tighter.
Oh.
We're going to see closures.
Yeah.
We're going to see downsizing for sure. And just in general, I think a big impact we're going to have is on jobs and the amount of teachers there are actually able to fill roles because that's going to decrease. There's going to be fewer children.
And I'm sure Labour are licking their lips at all this, right?
Fewer vacancies, eh? Let's just put that as the headline. Fewer teacher vacancies than ever before. Yeah, because the jobs don't exist.
Dylan, we're going to talk about this later on, okay? We're going to come back to this. So
okay, but
stay tuned.
First, let's dive into our week as always. Hayden, how's your week been?
My week has been fantastic. We've had an incredible ending to this week, as you all know, Dylan, because we have been in to our school on our day off. I know, crazy, because we're part-time, as many of you know, for our sports day. And Dylan, would you like to share what we've been doing for our sports day event?
Well, I, for a long time, had told the children that I'll be coming in on sports day, even though it's my day off, and they were very excited. Oh, my teacher's going to come in, because they're lucky enough to have two teachers through the week, because we share. And then I found out that the reason we're coming in, which is for a fun run, can't wait, a costume fun run. We'll get into that in a second. But I found out that was happening about 3 hours after sports day. All my children in the morning were doing sports day, no doubt thinking, wait, he told me he promised me he was going to come in. And I was like, yeah, I am for the surprise thing you don't know about later on. So that was a little bit of an awkward situation. But yeah, the main thing is, this is one of the big things I love about the summer term is that these kind of wacky events happen. This is what makes a primary school for me. And this is what, when I think back to when I was in primary school, what are the things that stay with me as core memories?
Yeah.
It's these silly things like we did an obstacle course in massive fancy dress.
Do you feel like you're missing out then by being part-time on some of these? Because they quite often happen on like Fridays. You know what I mean? Like we quite often do that.
To me, it's the paradox of part-time. We touched upon this very briefly last week. We talked about part-time in general and how a lot of the job doesn't lend itself to being part-time. So whether you're 3 days in school or 4 or 5, a big chunk of the job just requires you to have the very deep understanding of all your children. The provisions still need to be met. The planning in whatever situation you might be in your school still needs to be done.
Yeah.
But what I would say a big negative for going part-time for me personally is you do tend to miss out on bits. And there are pros and cons to being at the front of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or the back end of the week. Yeah. And I understand that because, my job share is always the first person to message me saying, oh, another bank holiday coming up, is it?
Because that's always on a Monday.
But I do find that all of those kind of fun events, that kind of expanding outside of the classroom and those staple, what makes a primary school experience really good for the children, does tend to happen towards the end of the week. And there's little things like this doesn't bother me genuinely, like, own clothes day, non-uniform days and stuff, always on a Friday. Yeah. I can deal with that. I wear my own clothes anyway when I'm not in school. It's not a problem. Yeah. But it is the big things like the sports day. At the end of the day, we missed out on sports day. And I love sports day. I love being with the children and seeing them excel in something else. And seeing a child who maybe struggles when I'm with them every day for maths and English shine and enjoy themselves doing sport. So I do feel like I miss that. Is it enough for me to think on the balance part-time's not worth it? No. It's just one of those things where that's a drawback of going part-time.
Yeah, there's literally nothing in life, is there, where there's not going to be pros and cons, right? And that is just a con. Although we did have a cake sale recently, and that was on a Wednesday.
I know.
So I'm just saying, we didn't miss out on everything. Plenty of cakes to eat.
I had lots of children on that cake. This is where you just know the pure innocence, and the reason why I love working with these kids so much is because there was a child who brought in £1. It was like 50p a slice of cake. Child brought in £1 so they could buy a couple. And we're like, I'm so excited. I'm going to give one to my little brother. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to give it to my little brother. And I had another child who brought in like £5, which is enough for 10 bits of cake. Didn't get that much. But he was walking around then all day with his cap, because he'd brought a cap into school.
Right.
He'd taken it off and filled it with 3 different cakes, right? And it was for his family to take home.
He didn't even eat them?
No, he didn't eat them. He was nesting them in his little cap, looking after them. And then I was in the middle of teaching in the afternoon, and I just had his tray open, looking,
they hatched.
making sure they hatched into little baby cakes.
Oh, that's so lovely.
But he had them in his tray, just looking at them, just making sure they're okay, close his tray again. And there's little things like that where I'm just like, crack on.
Yeah,
I think there's some people like, no, you can't. Every single second of the afternoon, you must be paying attention. Mate, he's just looking at his jam tart, making sure it's like not falling over the wrong way around.
He's got to look after and nurture that jam tart so it produces more jam tarts.
But one of them came up to me with a chocolate brownie, because she'd asked me that morning, what's your favourite cake? And I went, chocolate cake.
Cute.
And she came up with me a chocolate brownie, got this for you. And now, and I found out later on that was the only cake she bought.
I can imagine you not like pretending that you didn't immediately know why she was asking. I don't know why do you want to know what my favourite cake is? Looking at the selection outside that's already been set up. I'll have that one. Cheers, love. All right, go on then. Off you go.
Why could you possibly be asking? It's like the same time towards the end of the year when someone goes, what's your favourite chocolate? Oh, I don't know, actually. Gillian shells. Gillian shells.
What a random question. If I was to get chocolate, I'd probably say to that person, don't get me chocolate, get me a gift card for Waterstones. That's probably what I'd say. But my favourite chocolate, other than Waterstones, Gillian shells.
What's that? What? I don't know. I think I really like the flavour of those bottle of gin chocolates. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, I do like that. It's funny that, isn't it? Sorry, just whole class, ding, make sure they're all listening. I was just telling little Jimmy here that I do really like that bottle of gin flavoured chocolates. I'm just telling him though. So just bear that in mind.
Don't worry about it. Anyone else wants to wonder? But yeah, so I absolutely know what she's doing. But again, I said it not thinking, and she offered it to me. And it's just those little tiny things like that. I'm just like, oh mate, I just love it. But in general, I'd say going part-time, you do miss out on those. And I think a lot of people who go part-time, they end up with the worst end of the stick. Because I've spoken to a lot of people, and I want to make it really clear right now. I think we have a fantastic part-time role, which is truly part-time, where I work with another qualified teacher. Mm-hmm. I do 3 days a week. She does 2 days a week. And what's great about our setup is that we are treated as one class. Yeah. So if we're splitting planning or have jobs to do, they're split between the classes. And then me and my job share will go away and say, okay, cool, right, let's split this up between us. So let's say, even when it comes to reports. So report writing, we had to do the same amount as every class, but we sat there ourselves and just divvied it up. Yeah, and I find that way more useful. And there's 2 other options that are worse, which is one where you're the only qualified teacher, and then maybe using a TA or a HLTA to fill the role. You've got to do all the planning still. Yeah, you've got to do all the reports.
You wouldn't think that happens, would you?
Yeah,
you wouldn't think that happens.
Would I not think that happens in this school system where people are taking advantage of every single time?
You'd think it shouldn't happen, right? I don't know if you saw this as well, but I saw it online about 2 days ago. Someone saying, "Oh, I'm 0.6. Can anyone else tell me about their experience?" Because they're obviously thinking, "I don't know if this is right or wrong." You know, classic thing you see online all the time. "Oh, I think my school might be taking advantage of me. Can anyone else help me?" It's like, "Oh yeah, they are. They absolutely are, and it's doing it to me as well." Yeah. And it was someone saying that that their job share, exactly what you just said there, their job share was a TA. Mm-hmm. So they had to do 100% of everything except for the literal physical hours in front of the classroom that the TA was doing and getting paid 0.6. Yeah. And they were like, is that right? It was like, no, No, absolutely. Of course, it's not right. No, absolutely not. You should not be paying paid 0.6 when you're doing 100% of the work for like 2/3 of the job.
Exactly.
It doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, completely. And I think that's where it can be kind of brushed aside, this extra stuff that teachers do.
Yeah.
As like, oh, well, yeah, that's just part of the job, isn't it? Well, of course, you've got to do planning, a bit of marketing.
Yeah,
And all
when
that
you're
kind of
sick
stuff.
and you're off, you've just got to do all the work.
Yeah, you just got to leave it there, haven't you? I think the big thing that's forgotten as well, and I really don't want to gloss over this, is the role of the TA in that. The teaching assistant is absolutely being completely mugged off as well.
Yeah.
Let's be real about
Yeah.
it, because at the end of the day, they're not being paid a wage as a professional teacher to deliver lessons.
No way.
And people always come back to me and say, oh, well, if they've chosen to be a HLTA, they've taken the extra money. Yeah, do you know why? Because in that situation, a bit of extra money is better than not. And it doesn't mean that they're not being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. And also, like, if we're thinking about the scale that they're on, like we live in Kent, so we've got like a Kent pay scale. I'm sure other districts have, or counties have their own ones. It's not much.
No.
Anyway, like it's not like, oh, you're a HLTA now, so you did a bit of teaching. You've added a good 10 grand to your wage. No, you've added about 2 grand to your wage, if that.
Oh, but Hayden, they don't have to do any planning or any work outside of school.
Yeah. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you met a TA?
Yeah.
Do you understand how much work they often do outside of school? Again, I've got to big up our school, because I do think on the whole, compared to other schools that I've heard about and other TAs that have got in touch with us, and they almost speak as if it's normal that a TA plans their interventions, that it's normal that a TA spends hours and hours afterwards doing like making groups or assessing children.
Yeah.
That's not normal. If you're a teaching assistant and you're doing all that extra stuff, you are not paid for that.
Yeah.
And a teacher is. And it's not us putting teachers on a pedestal to say, well, teachers have to do all of this. No, we should be doing more. Teachers absolutely should be doing more than a teaching assistant. Just look at the amount of money and compensation we get for the job. And even down to the qualifications we've got on the way. Of course, we should be doing more than a teaching assistant. It's not me degrading teaching assistants or saying, oh, yeah, well, you shouldn't be doing that, should you? Because you're a teaching assistant. No, what I'm saying is you shouldn't be doing it because you're not compensated for it.
Yeah, you're not remotely compensated for it. You're barely compensated to do the stuff that you should be doing. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Comparing a TA to other jobs is more suitable, saying, okay, working as a TA is more like working a retail job or something like that, where it's just, no, actually, do you know what? You're paid for a certain number of hours.
That's it.
And an hourly rate, and that's all you should be doing. Like if I was working at M&S, there's no way I think I should be doing like an hour or 2 extra just to help out around the shop every day. Like, no.
Because if you didn't help around the M&S shop, the M&S shop wouldn't function. That sounds like an M&S shop problem to me. Not a me problem, giving up my time for free. But
exactly.
it's because there are children involved, and because it's a state sector, and because you only do it because you're a loving, motherly type figure, which is what TAs are seen as.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. We see it all the time, even as teachers, the whole motherly aspect and like, oh, men in a job. TAs, it's that extreme again. If you work with a male TA, you straight away, it's almost like a male nurse. It just jumps out at you as like, oh, why are you doing this job? This is for a motherly figure. And I think a part of that, I do think there's a tinge of misogyny in there. And I know it's against a man, and people will be like, oh, it's always misogyny. Well, it kind of is in this respect, because what we're essentially saying is, why is a bloke doing this job that's completely exploited for free work? Because they shouldn't be caring about the kids. It's a motherly job to come and care about the kids and do everything for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, we're allowed to exploit women.
Yeah.
Just not men. Don't let that man get exploited.
What's that man
we all
doing?
notice it when the man gets exploited.
Right, exactly. And I get the irony of 2 blokes sat here talking about primary school teaching, which is dominated by women. I understand it, but I just think it's just rife, and we just take advantage of these lovely motherly type figures who step into that teaching assistant role, who go above and beyond constantly, who are the glue that hold together a lot of what goes on in a school. If you walk into any school, if you ask someone, name the 5 people in this school who hold it together. Name 5, and I've always done this thought experiment in my head. Name 5 people in this building who, if you took them out, they'd have the biggest impact on how the school is ran. And the majority of the time, it's the people on the lowest pay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I don't think there's ever, like, I've worked in 3 different schools, and there's absolutely no way that in my 5 that there's not any TAs in that 5, despite there being like 40 members of staff at those schools. Exactly. Like, you could quite easily justify, oh, the TAs didn't make it to that top 5. Absolutely they do. Definitely do.
Yeah, all the time, because it's about impact.
Yeah.
It's not, if it was just about pay packet, we'd be having a different conversation. And I think, a lot of people do justify a bigger pay packet. I think teachers should be paid more than teaching assistants. I do think that leaders should be paid more than teachers, because I understand that the responsibility grows. And a lot of leaders right now are still doing classroom jobs. We're going to get onto that later when we talk about how schools are being squeezed, and you need to get as much teaching as you can. Squoze, of course. Sorry, teach, squoze, repose. But I guess the overarching point here, we've really gone on a tangent, which I've quite enjoyed actually, is just the consistent exploitation of kindness and niceness does seem to be something which is rife in schools. And it's such a shame that bringing this up often is met by, oh, don't be negative. These people just love the kids. They're doing it for the kids. What do you mean? Don't be like that. It shouldn't all be about the pay packet. It shouldn't, should it? But when I'm on £7 an hour, it does become about the pay packet slightly.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, definitely. I want to know one thing before we play the jingle, which is obviously been on my mind this whole time, and I've not really been listening to you. Am I in your top 5? I just need to know.
It does depend. Top 5 what? Top 5 most annoying people on the planet, yes.
Oh, forget it. Just play the jingle.
Right, with this new setup we've got here, it just gives me a chance to get my iPad out. So I've got my iPad now. This has replaced our monitor. Because I don't know if people knew, but every time we would do a podcast episode previously, we would just sat at your desk.
Yeah.
And in one of the monitors, we just have Word open. Very crude plan.
With our plan.
So it's on the iPad now.
And now I can't see it.
No, you can't see it. So I really am, like as evident anyway, taking control of this podcast and leading the way.
Are you officially taking that role of host and I'm the co-host?
Yeah, exactly.
That is it.
Yeah. When we set up our personal Instagram, maybe a good time to shout this out, Mr. Dylan Price and Mr. Hayden Stevens. But obviously you should go and follow the podcast Instagram first at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast. But either way, we made it and we wrote our bios completely independently.
Yeah.
And I wrote host of Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast because I'm a host. You're a host as well.
Yeah.
But then you, on your own, without any input, and this wasn't from me, you wrote in your one.
I wrote co-host because I acknowledge you.
Yeah, when I posted both side by side, it just naturally came up with the bio.
Yeah.
So mine said Dylan Price, host. Hayden Stevens, co-host.
You just can't. I just can't not think of The Office. I can't not think of assistant to the regional director of the podcast.
Right. Anyway, let's dive into our main chat this week. This is something that's come up a lot in general, and I think it's finally having an impact on schools. And it's this idea of the birth rate, okay, the fertility rate, as it's also called. And I want to start off by talking about how it's dipped massively.
Sure.
So if you look at the headlines in general across the world, the fertility rate or the birth rate, the amount of children we are having, has dropped massively.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to start off by clarifying something because I think it's really important, and I fell into this trap, and a lot of people fall into this trap and end up down a conspiracy rabbit hole. And they hear the word fertility rate dropping.
Yeah.
And I initially thought that meant the literal rate of fertility of a man or a woman.
You would suit. I can understand why you think that because I literally thought the exact same thing.
Right. And I think a lot of people see fertility rate dropping and they suddenly get down rabbit holes of 5G and COVID and jabs and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's the perfect example of just slow down and actually look what something means. Because when we use the term fertility rate in all of these research and findings, what we are literally talking about is how many children are born. And that is down to so many other factors than simply how well your swimmers are working. Okay, so when we say fertility rate and we hear fertility rate, don't go down a rabbit hole of thinking it's a biological shift that's happening massively. Yeah. Maybe there's something that's going on in general, but as a whole, it's a lot of factors coming into play.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that for people. But first, Hayden, before we dive into how it's affecting education and what we see right now, because I'm seeing it in the news and headlines a lot, what's your understanding of the current situation across the world with this birth rate, fertility rate?
Well, luckily for you, Dylan, I went down a massive rabbit hole of this as well a couple of months ago now because I was fascinated by this. And firstly, to clarify for full context, when we're looking at birth rates, to have what we call the I think it's the replacement rate. Yeah. We're looking at a rate of 2.1. What that means is, on average, people are having 2.1 children. Obviously, one person's not going to have 2.1 children, but it makes sense. Two people having two children, in a very crude sense, is going to replace the population.
So 2.1 allows for death. I suppose.
I guess so. Yeah, and I don't know, but for whatever reason, it's 2.1 rather than just 2. That makes sense.
So that if we kept that 2.1 average, population would stay the same.
Yeah, exactly. Our population in any given country of the world just wouldn't increase or decrease. It would just stay the same. We're just replacing the humans that we are. Yeah. When we die, we've replaced it with one other person, sort of thing. Now, across the world, in the last couple of decades, the fertility rate, the birth rate, has dramatically reduced. On average, across the whole world, it's gone way below 2. Yeah.
So I've got some facts here. So I'll tell you right now. UK birth rates have declined to their lowest levels since records began in 1938.
Right.
So we are having fewer children now than we have in 80 odd years.
Yep.
Only 605,000 babies were born in 2023 compared to 725,000 10 years ago. So that's a drop in 100,000. The total fertility rate in England and Wales right now, and when we say fertility rate, we just mean children born, is 1.49 children per woman. far below the replacement level of 2.1.
Yeah.
So just based on what we've just said there, we're seeing a shrinking population.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to think about, right? Because I remember having a conversation with, I think, my granddad about this, right? And he was saying, well, it makes sense that back in like war times and things, and even before then, that people were having more children because healthcare just wasn't as good. Like people needed to have more children for like reasons I'm not going to go into.
Well, then the replacement rate would have been higher than 2.1.
Right, exactly that, right? But ultimately, like when you get down to it, it just logically, obviously makes sense that it can never be lower than 2.1.
Right, exactly.
It can never be lower than that. If it is ever lower than that, then the population will decrease.
Sure.
Okay, and population was never decreasing before, so that's just worth clarifying. That okay, there might be other factors as to why it was higher back then, but ultimately population was always increasing, and now it's not.
Yeah. Because as soon as you get below 2, you are literally replacing 2 people who give who are involved in the baby making process with fewer than 2 people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, and the second thing I want to say is when I was looking all this up before, I remember seeing that it was. When it gets to 1.8, that's like a worry level.
Okay.
That was like a country should probably start being worried when their birth rate gets down to 1.8 because your population is going to start decreasing. And then 1.5 was like critical level.
Right. 1.49 then.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it was in the news a lot recently because it was like, oh, we finally went below the like critical level of like it will have drastic impacts on the future generations.
It's not like our society to wait until something is drastically horrendous to try and address it.
Are we going to try and address it though?
Of course not.
Probably not.
No, because here's something I wanted to talk about that. There's so many factors here as to why this is happening. And this is not down to just, it just seems to have happened. And it's so easy for conspiracy theorists to point to something out of the control and say, look, it's the people at the top making all this. No. Do you know what it is? It's people literally who are my age. I didn't have a child until I was 30. When I was younger, I wanted children earlier. It wasn't viable. No. It wasn't viable for me because I didn't feel like I was in a position financially to have a child and fully support that child. So I waited a little bit. That was my decision. That's happening across the board.
Are you sure it's not because we're just a snowflake generation that don't want to take any responsibility? Because I've heard that a lot on the internet as well.
It's insane. It's just crazy. It's just when both partners in a household have to work essentially full time just to keep a household afloat. And then if you introduce a child to that, we talked about childcare costs, etc., it's going to squeeze you massively. It's not selfish to think, is it worth me doing that yet? You're kicking it down the can because you're thinking, well, give me a few years and maybe we'll build up some kind of ability in our household to raise a child in a way we want to raise a child. That's not selfish. That's just people who are quite intelligent, I think, and being very rational, thinking what would be best for my unborn baby. It would be maybe to wait a little bit. And these factors aren't just coming out of nowhere. It's not just that we're suddenly more lazy as a generation. It's not that we suddenly don't care as a generation. It's that people have their own individual choices. And even those, people will come back and say, we can all choose to not have kids if we want. Yeah, of course you can. I think that's completely fine. But the reason this is dipped is not because more people are choosing just they don't want to have kids. There's more people who feel that they can't because of all those external factors.
Definitely. And bear in mind, what you're talking about there is just having one kid as well. That's still below the 2 required for the replacement rate. Now, I speak to a lot of my friends, and I want to go back to that point you just made because I find it really interesting, right? A couple of my friends, I'd say, are probably in the position. Most of my friends don't have kids, just for context, which I know most of your friend group does, and most of my friend group doesn't, which is really intriguing to me because I'm like, I'm sort of alone now.
And I tell you what, I'm 31, becoming 32 soon. None of my friends have more than 2 children.
Okay.
So even when we're looking at this context of you're saying my friends have more children, every single person who I know is below the replacement rate anyway.
Of course. Exactly, right? Which is just crazy. Now, when I speak to my friends about children and things like that, a lot of them, it's actually not the financial thing. For some of them, it is. It's like, we just don't think we're in the position. I've literally had that conversation when someone said, we just can't afford to have kids.
Same.
We'd love to have kids, but we just can't afford to. And that's like horrible. That's horrible. That makes me feel really sad. And the other one is I've got a couple of friends who are like, I just look at the landscape of the world now and I just don't want to.
Right.
And it's like that's the side to me where I'm like, I wonder if that is more of a thing now where people are just like, I don't think I want to raise a child in the state of this world right now.
That is a thing.
But I don't know if that's always been a thing. I don't know if that's changed. That would be interesting to me to know if people in 1944 were like, I'm not sure if I want to bring a child into the world right now. Point. Like, I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, the height of the Cold War through the 50s and 60s and things like that. It's like, when nuclear Armageddon was literally on the doorstep and people thought it might happen, maybe they didn't also want to bring a child, but maybe they just did it anyway.
So I don't know if that's always changed, but it's always been an interesting factor to me that you've got the kind of money side and you've got the side of people just being like, I don't mind the idea of kids, but I just don't want to bring them into this world. Nah, you're all right.
I've had that argument a few times, but the point being, it's dipped so much. It has to be more than one thing. It has to be a culmination of things. And I do think it's so blindsided just to say, oh, it's the things that have happened from the top-down government.
Of course
the government want more people.
Yeah.
Because do you know what people do? Pay taxes and sustain the state.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think pensions work?
I was about to say, do you know what else people do? They pay pensions for the older generations.
This is something I've said this on the podcast before, I think. I'm going to say it again. We've got a lot more listeners since then. And most people don't really understand what a pension is and what it does. And that's not me degrading them at all. It's just one of those things. It's a blind spot.
We just don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it at all. And when you think of a pension, I know a lot of people, and I've spoken to these people before, who had the idea that a pension is essentially a savings account. So you put your pension aside every month and you're building up a pot in a savings account of that money you've literally put in, and you cash that money out eventually. And that is just not how savings accounts or pensions work. When you're putting that money aside, the bank invests it. The bank does what it wants with it. It lends that money out to someone else.
They're making their money.
They're making their money, and they're boosting the economy, but they're investing in things, investing in businesses potentially. And then eventually the idea is that makes a return. And then when you get to retirement age, you can take money back. It's not the same money.
No.
And what happens is at the point that you're taking a pension, that money is coming from businesses, workers, tax, etc. in that exact period there. So I'm not paying for my pension now by putting a pot away. I'm essentially paying for the pension of other people. When I get to retirement age, if there aren't enough working people and the population decreases massively and those of working age of way less than those at pension age, there's less money in the pot for me to take.
Absolutely. What I find fascinating about the whole pension thing is that generally in the Western world, now I'm going to generalize quite a lot here by saying the Western world, because obviously there's differences between countries, right? But generally speaking, I think that the stat is you need approximately 3 working people to pay the pension for one pensioner.
Wow.
So that's roughly the ratio that you need. 3 working people pays for one pension.
Okay.
Which is why our pension system is completely built on a rising population.
Right.
And luckily, that's always existed. And this is the first time where it's like, oh, not happening anymore.
Well, the only thing that's been propping up that rising population is immigration. And people, again, don't want to have this conversation where we have been flatlining for a while now, fertility rates. And the only reason that we've been able to keep up with the rising demand in work and the rising demand of the state and the NHS and pensions, etc., is because of working age people coming into this country.
So our population is increasing through that.
So our population is increasing, but it's not through replacement of birth. It's through immigration. And again, we can have this discussion about how immigration, people don't like it, or they do like it, or they have this argument. And the bottom line is that that's currently propping up this country in terms of the money. I mean, oh, they come in here and they scavenge off us. Okay, cool. A very small percentage do, but also you are again going to sleepwalk into an even bigger crisis if we just completely shut the borders. This will happen quicker, and we will end up in a dire situation sooner. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer here. I'm just explaining that's a fact.
We're doing the transition nicely, aren't we, into our new politics podcast. But also, we are going to get to a point here with,
we want to lay
teaching.
the foundation, don't we?
But and there's a couple more things I think to say, which is, I think you can kind of see the future a little bit in terms of how this is going to play out. 2 things I want to say. Firstly, there's a good reason governments don't really want to address it. It's because you're not in power long enough. We're talking about lifetime change. We're talking about you need to implement things now because it's going to impact it in 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. And there are other countries where this has been going on for a lot longer, particularly in the East, where I think, is it South Korea?
So South Korea, guess, if you're at home now, all the context we've been saying about how 1.8 is all you should start thinking about, it's a problem, 1.5 is critical. Just have a little guess now before I tell the number, what you think it might be. And this is a bad situation here.
South Korea is the lowest, right? It's the worst in the world.
From what I could see, it's the worst in the world right now from my research. They're on a replacement rate of 0.72.
Insane. Less than one child.
Less than one child per couple, per woman.
Per woman,
Which again, if you look at the population, that's half the population.
Yeah, so. and again, I don't want to get it completely wrong, but I did watch a video on this as well months ago where I was thinking how is that going to work? And the video, unfortunately, was a bit like South Korea is basically done. Like in 50, 60 years, unless there's something drastic happens, which it's not, then it's just going to ruin, it's going to decimate that population. It's going to half and then half again and half again. Their population is going to exponentially decrease. And I saw someone in the comments that was like, oh, hi, I'm from South Korea. Just for full context here, our government never want to address this because no one wants to tackle the problem because they'll be out of power in 3 years anyway. So
and it can only be a detrimental effect. what we have to do, this, and we've spoken about this a million times before, because I am all for the choice of people, and I am all for people deciding not to have children. I don't think remotely it should be played against you.
Yeah.
But what those people have to do, they have to be loud about this, and we do too, is we have to talk about how we have to incentivize having children, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what is the thing that's going to continue the population?
I agree.
We have to have kids.
I agree.
We have to. So if someone's going to choose to have kids because they want to, that's great, fantastic. And they choose not to because they don't, okay, cool. But we have to incentivize having children. We have to give tax breaks for having children. We have to plow more money into education. We have to plow more money into childcare. If we want to have a society where you get all the work that you do currently out of people and you still want that, you're going to have to make hard decisions to fund parents properly, because at the minute parents clearly aren't funded properly.
No,
clearly, and all we get is people pointing at people who have people on the estate have 7 kids and they just pop them out because they know they'll be propped up. They're living in poverty. It's not like a life of luxury. It's not a lovely choice where let's have 5 more and then hope for the best. They're living in poverty. And then the other end of the scale, the people who aren't doing that necessarily and are thinking it through, which is what this person wants. Think it through. Don't have kids if you can't afford them. They're not. They're not having kids and they can't afford it. And that's meaning that we have a lower replacement rate than ever before. So there's not a solution to sit there and complain. Okay. These kids being raised in poverty and these kids who don't exist. That's the 2 worst options, isn't it? That's the 2 worst options. Literally. So if you're just moaning about it, that's what would come out of what you're saying. Don't have kids then. Okay.
But Dylan, back in my day, we just sucked it up and we just got on with it. We had kids. We worked 5 jobs if we needed to put food on the table. Dylan, didn't you know that?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get into this, but clearly, of course, it's just laziness. Obviously, that's the only thing that we can possibly think about. It's just laziness.
So let's just point the finger and not solve it.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. Just moan about people who do it, and then people who don't, moan about them as well.
Yeah.
They should be having kids. Should we?
Yeah.
Make it incentivize it then.
Let's link this then to education, right?
Should we?
It was a hell of a lot of context, but I think it was important to understand where we are in the world and where we are as a country, and just understanding how the birth rate, it does mean a decrease in population, which is ultimately going to be dire for the country, right? In every way. So how is this linked to education, Dylan? What's the link here?
Well, the main link here is essentially we have school places. Right? As a country, we have a certain number of school places.
Sure.
And those school places directly fund the school. Yep. So if a school has 100 children in a year group, they get roughly, depending on needs, etc., HCPs, of course, people premium. So there is nuance to this, but roughly twice as much funding as a school with 50 children.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're seeing, unfortunately, is because we're starting to get to the effects now, 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, where children start going to school, is that we're not filling up the spaces in schools anymore.
Some places we are.
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
are obviously, again, there's more nuance to this. You might listen to this thinking, in my area, it's still quite tough to get a space.
Sure.
There are lots of socioeconomic factors that might actually affect an area as to whether there's lots of children or not.
And you'll be unsurprised to know that it's inner city schools that are being hit the hardest here.
Right.
Because again, think about you're a normal working class person living in London. The price of living in London is insane.
Yeah.
All of these external factors we talked about that are clearly having an effect, I think are backed up as being true, because when you go to the places where it's had the highest cost of living, we're seeing fewer children being born.
Yeah.
So inner city schools, boroughs like Camden, Hackney, Lambeth, pupil numbers are falling fast.
Right.
And I think, just as a kind of side note here, the thing that frustrates me is that we knew this was going to happen. The children who are 4 and 5 years old going to school now, it's not like we've suddenly realized that there's going to be way fewer of them. Yeah.
More of them didn't just magic into existence when they were 3.
They were born 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is the thing where I look at it and just think, why is this like creeping up on us?
Yeah.
Why are schools closing potentially next year because of pupil numbers when we could have just looked at the census and been like, that's going to be a problem. Let's mitigate it.
Let me think. How does government work? Who was in power 4 years ago? And are they still in power now? Oh, of course they're not. They don't care. They didn't care because they knew they wouldn't.
Because you know what they can do now? They can weaponize it.
Yeah.
When a school closes, they can point to it and go, that's because of private school tax you put in it. And then when the school next to it closes, they can go, that's because the birth rate's low and you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you, who was in charge for 15 years. Wind your neck in.
They just don't care. And you know what? I can't imagine there is going to be any government that cares. Genuinely. Because they will all just pass the buck. Well, we probably won't be in power for much longer, so you deal with it.
Yeah, completely. Well, the end of the day as well, right? If children, the number of children is decreasing, should we be funding 100 space primary school with the same level of funding as we do if there's only 70 children going? Probably not.
Yeah.
Like realistically, but this isn't where the issue lies. This is where it's frustrating, because you can get to this point now and be like, well, I can justify this school merger. I could justify this downsizing of a school, reducing the intake. I can justify this school for being forced to close, because then there's just not enough money because there's just fewer children.
And all it means is a few people lose their jobs. But we didn't hear that bit. It just means a few people, a bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. But whatever, because it's a good move, isn't it? It doesn't matter that a few people are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, I know. So the BBC reported over 100 schools in England are at risk of closure in the next few years.
Okay.
I think the big impact we're seeing, and the reason that's forcing these mergers and these closures, and we'll come on to vacancies and redundancies in a minute, is because if you have 20 spaces all of a sudden, and let's just say roughly £5,000 per children is your funding.
Yeah.
That's £100,000
that
your school will be getting less of.
Yeah.
And we already know how tight funding is.
Yeah.
It's not as if that £100,000, because it's per pupil, we can just scale that down and be okay.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, you're going to scale down a building, are you? And the cost of running a building.
Right. Exactly.
No, of course you're not going to scale that down. That stays the same.
Yeah.
Oh, we can turn a few lights off now because the room's not being used. Yeah, but come on.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
No, completely. And do you want empty classrooms?
Yeah.
Really? Like, it's just crazy. And what the schools that are closing doing? Just sat there? Well, they're going to become redundant, derelict. And then if when pupil numbers rise again, hopefully in the future, are we going to open these schools up again?
Yeah, and have to spend tons of money refurbishing them,
Are
getting
they
ready?
just waiting? I mean, it's such a. What I would say about this is it's such a sad situation.
Yeah.
Because it is probably the right thing to be doing. But it's because of a situation we've let stagnate and let come, and it's the direct result, I think, of just the social collapse of this country, and like the whole idea of just like what is the point? There are parents thinking, what's the point in having a kid right now?
This is really depressing, but it's true.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
I think it's true. And look, let's be real for a second. You and I have left teaching. Okay, so we are leaving teaching at the end of this year. We've got the rest of this term left, and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I can. But then next year, we're not teaching in our school anymore.
Yeah.
And when we left, I think looking at the census and the number of children around us and the intake and what's coming up to our school as a junior school, that it was a bit of a relief for those in power that teachers were choosing to leave, because we're going to have some really harsh conversations in the future. Yeah,
definitely. Like let's just be really real for a minute. In our area, so we do live in an area where population is decreasing quite rapidly. I don't know if it's like compared to other areas. I don't know if it's worse or whatever, but our population is decreasing. And I know, because there was big conversations last year and the year before about it, all of the local schools were saying, right, we're going to have to really think about what we're going to do in 2, 3, 4 years, because there literally aren't enough kids coming up through nurseries right now.
Yep.
There's not going to be enough kids in infant schools.
Yep.
I saw a couple of years ago infant schools starting to reduce their class sizes. Sorry, reduce the number of classes they have. They were going from 3 form schools to 2 form schools. Oh, there's one teacher made redundant.
Right.
And it is happening. And our school, we've obviously left, and I do feel like it was maybe at the right time for them, because I do think in the next couple of years they're probably going to be looking at redundancies and getting rid of teachers, because there's not enough kids being born in our area. Our school's going to have that conversation. So I do feel like it was, a silver lining maybe to us leaving is that our school maybe doesn't have to have that conversation for a bit.
Was our jobs weren't advertised?
Yeah, we're not being replaced.
So this is what wound me up this week. Okay, so I saw an article all about the headline stats for teachers, number of teachers leaving. It's still over 40,000. Okay, so still a huge problem. Dropped by like less than 1 percentage point. So, some people out there were saying, well, it's dropping. Isn't that good? And I was like, okay, I mean, it's negligible. Like, it's still over 40,000 teachers leaving. And the thing that really, really frustrated me massively was the headline that there are fewer vacancies than ever for teachers. Because as a headline, doesn't that sound great?
Yeah.
Like we're filling these places up, aren't we? The vacancies don't exist anymore. No. Because do you know why vacancies are lower than ever? And we're filling up more vacancies as a percentage because there are fewer jobs.
Yeah. Me and Dylan and ours job, just to make this really clear, we just said it. Our jobs have not been advertised.
Yeah.
We are not being replaced.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, like, we might physically maybe shuffling around teachers in our school, but in our school there are 2 teacher jobs that existed this year that do not exist next year from us leaving.
Yeah.
And that is happening everywhere. We're not an anomaly.
Yeah. So it looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, 40,000 teachers, but the redundancies are okay because that vacancy never existed.
Yeah.
It never existed in the first place. And I know for a fact, again, previously, when vacancies were put up, they weren't being filled.
Yeah.
They weren't being filled because there wasn't enough people who wanted to do it. And now we're at the point where we're going to be squeezing it so much that it's going to overlap at some point. The number of jobs in primary school, because the number of primary school teachers dipped as well.
Yeah.
So secondary school rose, but primary school dipped because of what we're saying.
Of course.
And I've heard of so many people being made redundant. Just saying, okay, that job can't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It's for a combination of reasons, which is funding is squeezed anyway, and looking to the future, we're gonna have to save 50K.
Yeah.
And this assistant head job doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, being made redundant.
Yeah. Everyone else's workload goes up a little bit. It's a net loss in every way. Do you know what I mean? There's no gain to that. There's no win.
I see it almost similar to what we spoke about with part time. Jeremy said when you go part time, still a big chunk of the job is just you have to be working at 100%.
Sure.
If the children in your school were halved, it doesn't half your workload.
No, absolutely not.
Remotely.
No.
The amount, you still got to do all of the stuff that comes with running a school.
Yeah.
Maybe there's fewer children to go through and you have fewer children on your SEND list and there's fewer children to account for. But at the end of the day, there is a baseline level of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Whether you're a school that's one form or a school that's four form. That's why working in a school that's one form is so much more work.
It's a bit like the tax system, isn't it? It's like if you drop to 50%, you don't lose 50% of your pay because of the way you've always got a guaranteed chunk of your income that's tax free. It's the same sort of analogy, isn't it? Like the idea in your head. It doesn't work like that.
Do you think at all the move to ECT from NQT? So NQT, for anyone knowing, if you qualify teaching, and NQT would be like 1 year, kind of like a final step where you are qualified, you're getting paid, but 1 year of just like probation almost.
Your first year of being a qualified teacher,
being qualified teacher, newly qualified teacher, changed to ECT, which was early careers teacher.
Right.
And the point being that it moved from 1 year to 2 year.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of chat about how that move is masking over the kind of retention crisis because a lot more people are choosing to see out the 2 year. So they're getting halfway through their ECT.
Really?
Yeah, like when it's NQT, you'd finish your NQT year and be like, it's not for me, I'm out. But a lot of people now with ECT are getting 1 year into their ECT and they're making that choice to be like, okay, just 1 more year. Let's get the ECT done.
Oh, really?
Let's get this
I can't imagine that
done.
being a factor that would change my mind. I suppose the only thing that could be is if there are perks of being an ECT in terms of like time.
Yeah,
because I know when I was in NQT, and I really don't know if this is the case anymore. I'm being very naive here because we haven't actually spoke to many ECTs in the last few years. But when I was in NQT, I did get like an extra 10% out of the classroom because I was an NQT, and I don't know if that's still a thing of being an ECT, but that might be enough to sway someone to be like, well, I don't mind it too much right now. I'll stay the extra year, but next year when I'm losing that 10%, no way, I'm done.
Yeah,
I can barely manage it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know much about that.
Just a few people mentioned it just from talking to us, basically, be like, "Oh, I'll just do my ECT, and then we'll see."
Right. Okay.
And I just think that's going to mask it, basically, because what's going to end up happening is that teachers leaving the profession in the next 2, 3, 4 years will actually be a good way of masking the issue of fewer teaching jobs, redundancies, etc.
Yeah.
And I do worry, and I do get frustrated that it will be politicized into a positive.
Yeah, of course it will. That's what disappoints me the most, in all honesty. About maybe not the most, but it disappoints me with Labour because obviously we were well up for them getting into power, mainly again to get rid of the Tories. But I was well up for Labour, and I really hoped that they were gonna be great, and they are doing lots of good things. Don't get me wrong, but they do absolutely capitalize off of stuff like this. Like they're not stupid. Yeah, they absolutely know exactly what we're saying right here is true, and they've gone. Should we spin it this way though, so it just looks positive? Should we just not tell everyone that it's because birth rate is so low that like teachers aren't even being replaced and actually people are being made redundant? That's why there's not as many vacancies. Yeah. Or should we just say, oh, vacancies are down. Look how good we are. They're like, do that one. And I get why they do it. It's a whole thing as a game, isn't it? But it's like, it's just exhausting.
It is frustrating. I think again, as we're getting older and older, and we see more of this cycle come through. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot more. I understand a lot more people who have been through this, and they say, just wait. Just hold off because don't get me wrong, tomorrow if there was another election I'd vote for Labour. I'd vote for Labour tomorrow because I do think their attitude in general towards education is better, and I do think their attitude to fixing things that are important to me personally aligns more with what I'm saying. I do still think that, but it doesn't. Don't get me wrong, I'm really frustrated. I'm really frustrated, and when you get the education secretary basically, talking against the union, classic rhetoric that if the Tory ministers were doing it, we'd be sat here saying, ridiculous. You've got to side with your teachers. The unions are the teachers. They're not this separate blob that are just infiltrating our minds. We very much are the unions. We are part of the union and they speak for us when we vote yes. That's our vote and our voice. So when you're disregarding the unions as just like not thinking about the kids or caring about the kids, you are saying that I don't care about the kids, and that's disgusting and wrong, and it really winds me up. And I'm just you could have your rhetoric, just tone it down a bit. Just be on the side of the people who actually are your strongest supporters. Just do it. Just back us a little bit, And that really frustrated me and really annoyed me. And when I'm seeing things like this happen now, I would be okay with a Labour government coming out and saying it's because of this. It's because of this decline in birth rate.
Yeah.
And that's because of, the rates of children has dropped because of all of these problems that we've seen over the past how many years. And here's our plan to help tackle it. Here's our incentivization for people to have children so that as a society we move on. Because all that's happening at the minute is a lot of dog whistling.
Yeah,
we're going to reduce immigration. We're going to reduce immigration. Yeah, okay, we're going to talk about the whole replacement theory. Like, not replacement theory, that's some right-wing conspiracy thing. But what I mean is the replacement rate.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how that's going to impact that, and then we're not going to have enough working people in the future in this country. No, because actually, if I just say we're going to reduce immigration, it might get me a good headline in the Daily Mail, which is the people we're trying to convince. What about me? What about the people who you've already convinced are already part of this journey?
Don't care. We just want to swing some voters away from the right to our side.
Completely.
So.
You're going to lose us.
Yeah.
It's happening already. People are walking away. That's why there's a huge rebellion of Labour MPs right now about the disability and welfare cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's fundamentally why they got into politics.
Yeah.
And comes a point where you don't just sit there and go like, oh, well, they're the red team, so I'm going to back them.
Yeah.
No.
There comes a point where playing the game, which is what the politicians generally do, playing the game can actually just lose all your supporters. You can actually just switch sides. Because I'm just playing the game so well that no one actually backs me anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe don't do that. That's probably not the best way to play the game.
You're not convincing people and you're losing your base. So, well done.
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
So realistically, they're probably looking at this thinking, we probably won't be in power next time anyway because we're absolutely decimating ourselves. So do we need to worry about this thing? Nah, kick it down the road another 3 years. They can deal with it then. And then they'll do the same. And then they'll do the same. And then we'll suddenly be like South Korea and we'll be like, oh, it's 15 years down the line now. It's completely too late to do anything. Our birth rate is at like an uncontrollably downward spiral. Like we've already raised like an entire generation's worth of children where the birth rate's tiny. They already won't be able to pay for pensions for 15 years in the future now, which will absolutely decimate our country. It's too late. Whoops. But luckily I'm 65 and I'm a politician, so I don't care. Yeah.
I've got my trust fund or whatever it was from earlier.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about something because I know you're passionate about it.
I love doing that.
Yeah. Let's do it. It's a podcast after all. I want to put it to you now about how all of this kind of background is massively exacerbating a problem that already existed because of squeezed funding, which is the experienced teacher is just disposable, completely disposable, because the experienced teacher, it doesn't matter anymore that they've been teaching for 15 years. It doesn't matter anymore that they know the curriculum inside out. It doesn't matter anymore what kind of outcomes they get. They cost £15,000 a year more than an inexperienced teacher. How do you think this is going to play out in the next few years as this problem inevitably becomes more and more of an issue?
I think we'll see an issue that we already have being even more exaggerated, which is, and I'm seeing it online already, I speak to a lot of people who are saying that, I can't get a job now unless I agree to cut down like 2 pay points.
Yep. Because
I'm on M6 or I'm on UPS, I'm on the upper pay scale, so I'm being paid a lot more, significantly more compared to a newly qualified teacher on ECT. So basically, I either don't have a job anymore. I either stick at the school I'm at and they have to put up with me because they can't fire me. So I've just got to stay here forever if I want this job. But if I want to move, I have to take a pay cut or just not get a job. Right? I think that's going to happen more and more and more. And I think older teachers are going to leave the profession and we're going to have as many ECTs as possible and cheaper teachers as possible. And we're just going to drive away experience because we can't afford it anymore. And we're going to go, oh, well, that's what we have to do. And everyone will know. Everyone will know, obviously, there's a reason we pay people for experience is because they're experienced and they're good at their jobs. Like it does actually, there is merit in that. Yeah. And it is worth the experience, but we simply can't afford it because, pupil numbers have dropped, we can't afford it anymore. We can either let you both off or just let you off. Ooh, let's maybe get rid of you and have two cheaper teachers. I don't know.
So what would you say to someone who comes back to that and says, are you degrading ECTs? So many of our listeners, Hayden, right now are ECTs who are listening to this, and you're basically saying they're worse teachers. What's wrong with an ECT?
I think it just goes back to what I just said about experience. Like, I just do the counter. Are you degrading 10 years of experience in teaching? Right. Are you saying that's worth literally nothing? Yeah. Did you get nothing? Because I tell you what, put me up against my NQT self, I am worlds better at every single element of teaching than that guy was. I just am because of my 10 years experience. Yeah. It doesn't mean if you can't put me up against a different NQT, a different ECT. Me,
because I'd be much better than you.
Because obviously you were insanely good. Everyone praised you as you walked through the school. So that's what people like to do. They're saying, you're putting yourself against other people. No, I'm not. I'm just saying in general, we can use generalizations sometimes for the good.
Oh, careful.
We can. Generally, if you've done the job for 10 years.
You're generalizing a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
You know more stuff. You know how to do things more efficiently, better. Doesn't mean everything's better. I'm sure I'm more complacent in some areas than I was as an ECT.
I was going to come back to you and say this. Do you not think... be honest. Be brutally honest now.
Yeah.
Was your attitude better?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. My attitude was better. Was I more malleable? Yeah. Great in the eyes of SLT.
Right.
Did I work longer hours? Great in the great in the eyes of SLT.
When I use better very loosely in that term, you know exactly what I mean when I say better.
Right.
But again, does that not fall into the trap of that's why it's happening right now?
Yeah.
Because the older teachers like us sit there and say, that's ridiculous, no. Whereas the newer teachers in general, and I do think we're bucking the trend now in a really good way, where ECTs are standing up for their rights, etc., are more likely to be like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'm young, I don't have a family. I want to just finish off maybe this discussion about experienced teachers, because I think you made your point very clearly and it's happening and it's a shame. But if you were to walk into an amazing school, what kind of mixture of teachers would you see in terms of experience? What would you want to see? What do you think is a good? Because do you want exclusively 15-year plus in a school?
Yeah. I think if you were being idealistic, you might say, on paper, that might be the best outcome because everyone's the most experienced they can be. Doesn't work in the real world, though, does it? Because we do need training. We do need new teachers.
Precisely.
It's like the replacement rate thing, isn't it? But in teaching, right? Yeah. I do need it. So I think you should see honestly a really good balance all the way across the spectrum. I think a really good school, again, if we're generalizing and and our country needs to develop over the next 20 years and have more teachers that also become experienced, they do need to start somewhere. So we do need every school realistically on average should have a bunch of ECTs all the way up to a bunch of really experienced teachers. The ECTs can learn from the really experienced teachers, and the really experienced teachers can also learn from the ECTs because, like we've just said, there are perks to being an ECT compared to being maybe a complacent 10-year-in teacher like I probably am right now in a lot of aspects of my job.
It's pros and cons. Absolutely pros and cons. And when I think back to being a newly qualified teacher, I'm going to go as far to say is that every single thing that I learned that has stayed with me as good practice has come from watching experienced teachers.
Yeah.
I think that's invaluable. I think that link between experienced teachers and newly qualified teachers is invaluable because you just see things you don't get out of a textbook. Yeah. You see things you don't get out of a university lecture. And ultimately, when you're doing your placement and you're with one class teacher, you see one class teachers teach, and then you're just doing it yourself.
Yeah.
I was incredibly lucky, and I talked about Fran a lot. Fran was my class teacher when I trained. We work with her now still. I was so lucky that I've said this before, I just copied her. She was such a good teacher that I could sit there and watch. And then I thought to myself, cool, well, I'm brand new. So I'm just going to, that seems to work. The kids are happy and they're learning lots. So I'm just going to copy her. And then from then on, when I went out to observe different people, I observed a teacher called Lynn. She was unbelievable with the kids, had a smaller group, children who struggled to read.
Experienced?
Very experienced teacher. Taught some of my friends when they were in school.
Yeah.
Unbelievably good. Again, I got loads of behavior management from her, just from watching her for honestly 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I do think that we're going down a very, very bad road at the minute where these experienced teachers are being lost from school. Newer teachers are going to lose that experience.
Yeah.
And newer teachers are going to rely on trial and error, which will improve them, obviously. But they're going to miss out on them golden nuggets of that person's been a teacher for 25 years and she does this unbelievably well. And she's got a track record for the last 15 years of getting out the kids. Go and watch her. She's so good at that.
I would finish with this. One of the huge catch-22s, I think this whole thing, right, is a really good thought experiment is comparing to the private industry. Right?
Yep.
When you're paying for experience in the private industry, you're quite often paying for efficiency. You're paying someone more because they can do the 2-hour job in 1 hour now because they're just so good at it, right?
Yep.
And the catch-22 in education is this huge part of what makes experience worthwhile, which is efficiency. There are other elements, like you said, of just literally knowing, just knowledge and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But a lot of it is efficiency. I can do things in a lot less time, which means I can do more jobs now in school than I could have done when I was an ECT.
Yeah.
That part doesn't matter. Do you know why? Because we've built this perfect system of time doesn't matter because you'll do it all in your own time. So schools, I say schools very loosely. It doesn't matter now if you're efficient or not. Because the NQT will just spend 3 hours doing it and I'll spend 1 hour doing it. No one cares. They're paid the same. Do it in your own time. No one cares. Because that's what this system is built on. It's built on martyrdom. So
true.
Don't care. Efficiency, there you go. There's half of what makes experience worthwhile gone. Now I can justify, do I really need to pay this much more for this teacher? Yeah, because they're way better at doing these jobs. They can get them done quicker. Yeah, I don't really care though, because the ECT will just do it anyway in the evening, so that doesn't sway me.
Such a good
Why else do I want to pay 15 grand more for a teacher? They know more. Oh, that's all right. We'll just doesn't matter.
So
We've
we've got 15 schemes in. They're just going to copy.
Yeah,
and
we
then,
change the schemes every year
change
anyway,
it.
so that
Yeah,
doesn't matter
so
because we don't actually value the knowledge at all.
Yeah.
Um,
the experienced staff member in staff meetings will talk out and say, well, this might not work because of that.
Oh no, we don't want them challenging us. We just want ECTs that are malleable. So hang on a minute. I think we'll I can't see any drawbacks in only having ECTs and no experienced teachers to learn from. Let's just save money and have ECTs. That's one like really sort of negative, pessimistic way of viewing it. But it does happen in certain
I think
places.
it's a realistic way of viewing it.
Yeah.
I think that's what's happening. And again, I'm going to now vouch for those amazing leaders out there who have such a headache right now.
Yeah.
Those unbelievable leaders who are sat there knowing they have to make people redundant.
Yeah.
And I don't want to come across here willy-nilly and say like, oh, there's people there licking their lips to get rid of those experienced
I agree. That's why I said
members.
pessimistic, by the way. Because not everyone thinks like that.
Completely agree with you. And I'm saying, I think what you're saying goes through the minds of some people, and it has to.
Yeah.
It has to, because they're thinking it's going to save money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But realistically, for the vast majority of leaders out there who are unbelievable people, genuinely, they are sick to the stomach with this.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that keeps heads up at night. And this is the kind of thing where heads earn their money. And I want to back them up a little bit here and just say, it's easy to sit here and go, well, yeah, you're the one making the redundancies. Isn't that easy?
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
Yeah.
Any head teacher working in a school has made personal relationships with all of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that that head would have to make someone redundant who has a family and a mortgage, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes in a million years. No. So I want to shout out those leaders right now who are in this situation, who couldn't think of anything worse, who have their hands tied for funding because it's just from the top down.
Yeah.
And they're the people who, despite being at the top, are really in the middle. They're in the middle of a systemic problem in the country, which we spoke about earlier, which then feeds down to the funding of schools, etc., and the actual teacher staff themselves. And I really don't resent them at all. And I think really highly of them. And I want to just like reserve a spot here just to talk about leaders for just a few minutes and how I can't fathom how we get to just sit here on a chair and talk about stuff, sometimes from our soapbox and our high horse, and say, this is a huge problem. It's ridiculous. How could this happen in schools? Do you know what? The people on the front line are trying to do the best they can.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. No, I agree. And I'm just thinking now, like, back to an alternate reality of, let's say we weren't leaving, right? And our school didn't make, and we said maybe it was a bit of a relief for them because they're like, Christ, okay, that's 2 less teachers we have to replace now, 2 fewer teachers. Sorry, before you correct me.
No, I was just going to say it, but it's a teacher podcast. You have to get it right.
You live rent free in my head when I say the word less or fewer.
Yeah, get it right. You're a teacher.
But I think, okay,
you should get it right. I'm going to comment on your reel. You wrote the word practice with an S instead of a C. Yeah, because S is a verb. All right, so S is correct when it's a verb. Thank you.
Okay, so I love your little rants. We need to do more rile up Dylan sections. But yeah, going back to an alternate reality where we didn't quit, right?
An affect is with an A, if this a verb.
Oh yeah, sorry, please interrupt me again.
Honestly,
affect
is a noun.
You're a co-host now. I'm the host.
Affect.
You're a co-host. I'm the host.
Right, sorry, I won't affect your talking anymore.
Don't affect my talking anymore because you have to practice this a bit more.
Sorry, go on.
So imagine we didn't quit. I wouldn't feel, I just want to put into practice like what you're just saying, and I think this is true. I would not feel angry at my head teacher if he had to make me redundant.
Completely.
Do you know what I mean? Like my anger would not be at him in any capacity because I know how hard that decision would be for him. I know it wouldn't be personal, and I know it's not his fault.
He doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do it. It's not his fault. So I wouldn't be angry, and I think that just proves that like what you're saying is true. Like we're not here saying head teachers, what are you doing?
No,
it's not that at all.
And I think we summed that up perfectly before. We were saying like this is the right thing to do in this situation. Of course, schools are going to have to close. What do we do? Just prop them open?
Yeah.
Prop up the space? Like
with what?
We can't. Like we're just paying a teacher to teach, not teach. Like I get it. I understand it. It's just really frustrating that it's got to this point.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that has just happened overnight. We've known this for a long time. And yeah, I think going back to what you just said again, so how do I put this? I feel relief for my school that me leaving was able to lighten that load slightly of the long-term picture of, oh my gosh, what we're going to do in the next 3, 4, 5 years if the birth rate continues in this way.
Yeah, exactly.
I do like the idea of that not being a problem. And I don't want, I would rather that than it be looking bad politicized.
Yeah.
Oh, there's more vacancies now because I've left and I'm part of that statistic. Isn't that awful? No, I'd rather it look a bit better for the headline, even if it masks over the problem, because it means the literal people who I really like and have worked with for a decade have an easier ride.
Yeah, who aren't in a position like us, fortunately, to be able to make this move willingly anyway.
Yeah.
Who they wouldn't then have a choice. No. They're now.
There are some people who are teaching right now who, if they were made redundant, would struggle.
Yeah, of course they
Would
would.
struggle.
Yeah, most people.
Yeah, because they could go. Of course, they could go and get a job, but immediately not going to get a job
No.
at the same
Yeah,
level.
same pay as well. Like
Not immediately. I mean, long term, maybe you could leverage something, and it might work for some people. But immediately, well,
yeah, no way.
not.
And it's your profession. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
gutting.
yeah,
It's gutting.
that's it.
Anyway.
Exactly that. But yeah, in general, just kind of culminating everything we talked about in terms of this lower birth rate, etc.
Mhm.
Do you think there's anything we can actually do immediately in this situation, or is it unfortunately one of those times where we always try and think what the solution would be? Is it one of those times where we just say, guys, this is going to happen, and what we can do is control ourselves and think about the future?
I think you've kind of already said it in this podcast. I think it's relatively simple. There are two things. Immediately, immigration is the only answer. We can't magic people into existence, right? So if we need more people in the country, it has to be immigration. But if we want to improve the birth rate, which is really what we're talking about here, then obviously it takes time, and we need to incentivize it. How else can we do it? How else can we do it, right? Clearly, people in the past, forever basically, have wanted to, on average, have enough children where the population was increasing, right? I'm not saying everyone individually, but I'm just saying as a population, we've obviously had the desire to want to continue reproducing, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that desire has just suddenly disappeared and humanity's completely evolved and changed and that overnight. So clearly there are external factors. So what can we do? Oh, we can maybe help those external factors by incentivizing having children again. Let's reduce some of the bad external factors as a nation, as a world, in the world, whatever. And I don't know what else we could do. Do you know what I mean? That's it. We just incentivize having children, tax breaks, whatever. Make it more affordable.
What I would say to anyone in any job, in any walk of life ever, but I'm going to talk directly to teachers now, is just start thinking about how you can leverage what you do. Just start thinking about your personal leverage and just spreading yourself a bit more than having all your eggs in one basket. Now, I don't want to be the person sat here on a podcast where we do a podcast and have tutoring and do all these other things as well as teaching, to say to someone, why don't you just do 4 things? Why don't you just do 8 things and just spread yourself out? Because it is not that simple. And I vehemently believe that you should be able to just be really good at your one profession and should sustain you in life. Unfortunately, that is not what is happening right now. And when you're looking over the edge of a cliff of the birth rate and how we are going to have fewer children around, and that will mean that teachers are being made redundant, you can't control that big machine.
No.
Something I've learned the hard way over the last few years of education in general. We're not going to be able to control that big machine. So if that is the way it's going, and it certainly looks that way, we have to start thinking about what our future options would be. So if you're in that position right now where you think, oh, that's all right, I've got 2 or 3 years and before that's a problem, start thinking now.
Yeah.
Start thinking about doing some tutoring if that's what you want to go down. Start thinking about retraining. My friend was an estate agent. He worked so many hours as an estate agent. He knew it wasn't what he wanted to do, but he needed a job. He worked his way up. He did amazingly well in that job. Amazing person. And he trained in the evenings to become a cloud software engineer.
Yeah.
And do you know what he's got now? A job doing that.
Yeah.
Less hours.
Yeah.
Fewer hours. Oh gosh, I don't know now. I'm ready. Fewer hours and you're getting more pay.
Yeah.
More secure job. More future proof. Enjoys it more. And that's only because he made that plunge to do that.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
but
it took 2 years.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's not something you can say, I'll be all right, I'll just find something else overnight. All I'm saying to you guys is just start thinking about it where you can, even if it's 1 or 2 hours a week.
And it might not even happen, but have that backup plan in your head, basically.
Exactly. What you don't need to do is cut short. No. I'd hate for anyone listening to this to be like, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. 2 years down the line, oh, sorry, you're redundant. You've got to go and find another job somewhere. You're doing something you hate, half the pay, struggling to pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
Just get in touch if you want some advice as well. I'll help.
Yeah.
But just start thinking about it for
definitely.
sure.
Thank you for that, Dylan. Where can they get in touch?
They can get in touch on Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast. They can email us the at comes later. They can email us teachsleeprepeatpod@gmail.com. And if you follow us in there, send us a message. We should be able to pick it up. And just one thing.
Yeah.
If they did get this far into the episode, Hayden, what could they do?
They could leave us a review.
They could.
Specifically a 5-star review.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely right. We do like them ones.
Yeah, they do really, really help us. Jokes aside, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any experience of anything we talked about in today's episode, do get in touch. Let us know about your potential redundancies, your schools squeezing. And do you know what I want to know as well? Anything you want us to talk about in the future. So if you have any ideas for episodes, I love receiving messages from you guys. We've got a whole bunch and we'll talk through some of those messages, I think, next week as well.
Brilliant. See you next time.
Bye, guys.